My name is Tim Arnold. Here we're going to talk about the state of self-hosted media. The last couple of years, I've done seminars on some audio hosting or audio server, open source audio server products. And I was putting something together for this year, and I started thinking about what's interesting and what we're all doing. And the question has come up more or less. Who is still hosting their own media? Is it in the mainstream? Are college students hosting their own stuff or using their own stuff? How are we engaging with media? So I'm asking a question, the last 20 years, and I'm using 20 years as a specific date, 12/15/2005 is the beginning of YouTube. If anyone's thinking about that, doesn't seem that long ago, but it's 20 years. We've seen the exponential growth of pay media streaming solutions for both audio and video. In that time, we've also seen the demise of user-owned physical and digital media. And that's really where the questions come in. How has online streaming changed how we engage with media? And what are some tools we can use to consolidate and access our own personal media? For some folks, and probably for a lot of folks in this room, some of the things I'm going to talk about you're already very aware of, but I want to just kind of go over, kind of bring it all together into a conversation about media and media streaming and media hosting. First and foremost, I don't suggest that in any second that I'm an expert on this. I'm an active computer hobbyist. At various times I've worked in the audio industry of some sort. And lastly, please, no matter what we're talking about today, don't do anything illegal. There's my disclaimer, said. Okay, so where do we get our digital media from? We're just having a conversation before we begin about that. One gentleman mentioned that he rips DVDs from his computer, and I think a lot, or Blu-rays. I think a lot of us are doing that, but that's sort of what we sort of hope that where digital media is coming from, that people are getting, but there are still a lot of people out there that are pirated. So personal library, people getting stuff from a public library. And lastly, downloads or people pirating. Where is illegal file sharing? Where is it in 2025? We use, those of us that are ripping our own stuff have long used the term fair use. I've used the term fair use for most of my adult life in terms of copying stuff. This goes back to having a tape deck and recording your album. Technically, it's illegal to record a record onto tape, but we qualify that as being under fair use. And I've heard that used probably 1,000 times in the course of my life. But the reality of fair use, illegal doctrine that promotes freedom of expression by preventing unlicensed use of copyright material. The reality of fair use is technically it's not legal. The Digital Millennium Copyright Act of 1998, as I'm sure most of you are familiar with. Who's got a letter from anyone on the DMCA? Anybody in here? Has no one got a letter? Really? You guys are all honest people. Good for you. The DMCA basically says that you cannot circumvent any sort of copyright stuff on your Blu-rays or DVDs or CDs. It is illegal to. It is a criminal act. Not the least of which is downloading of or disseminating of copyrighted material. I will just share with you, this is not mine, it is a friend's. This is what you get from the cable company. Should you pirate or should you illegally download information from the internet? The much further version of this includes download dates and download files and a cease and desist to remove the file from your server. Basically what happens with this is how this works, and like I said, this is not mine, and I do not know this firsthand. I know this from friends. That there is a strike. The government has sort of a 3 strikes thing on this. When you get 3 or 4 of these, you get you get fined from the cable company. So don't do it. You cannot copy rip your own media according to DMCA. However, most of us at some point or another have been doing that. And the question, for example, everybody ripped their CDs 20 years ago, put them into their iTunes. Technically not legal. Gray. It's a great big giant gray area. I wanted to take a quick look at stats and talk about pirating for a second. Number of visits to media piracy sites worldwide. As you can see on this, and this is from 2022, and I have to sort of add to this that pirating statistics are difficult to say the very least. If you take a look at this, there are a lot of countries that are missing from this. The United States, by far and away, has the most folks that are downloading pirated information. If you go further into these statistics, China, Russia, Indonesia are the folks that are hosting the most of this information, but it's the United States. We are the biggest users of pirated media. Most common forms of music piracy has changed. I came into sort of researching this and looking at this, thinking that torrenting was the way that folks were still sharing music, and apparently I'm old as torrenting has gone away. Now the most common form of pirating, and this is for music, but I believe this is the same for video. Stream ripping is the most common form of pirating at the moment. And if you take a look out onto the pirating websites, it seems, from what I can tell, it seems that most of the stuff that people are posting anymore are direct streams from streaming services. Where are all the pirates? This isn't something that anybody should be surprised by. The typical pirate is a male aged 16 to 24, which I don't think this has changed in 4 years. I think if you go back to the early 90s, it was exactly the same stat. College males with great internet connections stealing media everywhere. The good news to this, and this I find, this is sort of the most interesting piece to this, the decline of online piracy, the key driver to the decline is the increasing availability of affordable legal content rather than enforcement measures. This is from an article in the American International Law Review. I highly recommend you guys check this out. If you want the link for this, I can get it to you. It's a great article discussing where online piracy is today, and sort of they posit their end statement on this is it's declining because of streaming services. They're sort of pushing it back into the underground, which I think is a great feature of streaming, whether you like it or not. It's sort of ending piracy. That's a plus for all the capitalists in the room that would suggest that. Taking a look, in 2024, streaming hit 40% of television usage. Cable is down to 27%. This is a great stat. Broadcast, I don't know who's looking at television broadcast. I don't even know where you can get broadcast TV anymore. Is at 20.5%. YouTube and Netflix are far and away the largest streaming providers out on the internet. And this is I think this is a very interesting stat. What has happened, and this is sort of a term that you can find quite a bit of places all over the internet, streaming fragmentation has led to an increase in piracy, and this is sort of the other side of that. The piracy is on the rise again in 2024 because consumers are getting frustrated with the number of subscriptions that they're having to get all of the media content. You want to watch a TV show, for example, it's on Hulu, and then you want to watch a TV show that's on Paramount. You want to watch a TV show that's on Apple, and now you're up to 3 streaming services that you subscribe to. However, the music industry, if we're not aware of this, has avoided this problem by allowing users to access any song they want from any platform with a single subscription. More or less, just I'll pick on Spotify, but you can go to any of the music streaming services. Pretty much everything is there. Apple has some things. I think the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Neil Young sort of have specific streaming services that they only use, but for the most part, the big streaming services have everything. I want to just take a look at some stats on music streaming. It makes 84% of the music industry revenue at this point, which is astounding. When you think about that change that's happened in the last 20 years, roughly. Music streaming industry grew by over 10% in the last year. Its global revenue currently sits at $17.5 billion. 78% of us listen to music via streaming services, and 11% of music listeners are purchasing physical media. I'm suggest that a good portion of that 11% folks are buying records, which is sort of another topic for another conversation. I think it's interesting. Here are the largest music streaming services in order. Spotify is the largest at 31% of the market. Tencent, which doesn't exist in the United States, is in China, has 14% of the global market for streaming. Apple Music, 12%. Amazon, YouTube, NetEase, and Yandex, China and Russia. Both of those, again, aren't available here. And then Deezer and then others at 9.7%. It's interesting that I'm currently not subscribing to any of these, but I always thought that Deezer was the best one. Does anyone have any experience with this? On this Deezer when it came out was.
I'm surprised they're still in business because they just dropped off.
When they started, they were suggested they were going to be the highest res and best streaming music, and it sort of existed, but they're still out there plugging away at it. So here's the not great news on that. Some of you guys probably already know this. In fact, probably everyone here probably already knows this. Artists don't make a whole lot of much money from streaming, but if you're not familiar of how much folks are actually making, Spotify, an artist gets 0.003 of a cent per stream. So 31,000 streams gets you $1 back if you're an artist on Spotify, which is depressing.
Is it balance of $1 or 1/10?
I'm sorry?
It looks like 10th of a cent. Or 3/10 of a cent? Oh, sorry, is that supposed to be a dollar sign or not a cent?
Where on Spotify?
Yeah.
It's a dollar sign.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Is that not coming up right? Yeah, but
Oh, yeah, 300, I think.
I mean, it's amazing how little an artist gets streaming, which, and I mean, this is a topic for another conversation, but you look at how much folks are charging. If you've been to a big stadium concert in recent years, you realize how much revenue artists are making from that. It makes sense that the stuff is so expensive when you go out to a concert, relative to artists aren't making any money like they used to via stream. All this aside, in the world of open source and free, in the last 2 years, I did a year ago, I discussed something called an avid. Was anyone at that session last year? We'll talk a little bit about that today. I'm also going to talk about something called DAV file. Nobody was here for this, great. So meanwhile, in the world of open source and free, I'm self-hosting your own media. What do we do with the stuff that we already own? Are we still buying stuff? I know we were talking earlier, you're still buying stuff. I still buy music, I still buy DVDs. But what do we do with all that stuff if we want it digitally? Personal media and the ripping of personal media is a big giant gray area of legality. I'm not a lawyer, but I realize it's shaky at best in terms of sharing and getting music. Because I sort of was going to say, when I started to put this together, one of the things I was going to talk about was your ability to go to the library and get out DVDs and rip them. That isn't acceptable according to the DMCA, which I don't think most people realize how illegal that is.
The interesting thing is now, within the past 2 weeks, they started reporting that DVDs bought in the 2000s are starting to not work.
Wow. Yeah, Warner Brothers,
Yeah.
They'll replace
Have
it.
they actually said
No, they
that?
won't.
Yeah.
Not if it's in print, not in print anymore.
Oh, yeah, it's on print, yeah, but if they still have it in print, they'll.
Yeah.
Because I actually, I
Is it just
emailed them
physical
and they
media
gave me a
that we're doing?
So I've been asking that for years, what is the shelf life of a DVD? They're finally admitting it, that it's not.
It depends on the manufacturer, yeah, some of the, like,
Right.
the ones from Warner Brothers, they use, there's a problem with the manufacturing
Your
process.
VHS videotapes are.
No, they're not saying the same thing about CDs, are they?
Players.
No, there are some CDs there that they had a problem with the substrate, so it's the plastic didn't keep
Wow,
up, and so,
That's the argument for ripping.
yeah,
That's
it decayed,
really
yeah.
interesting.
wow.
And if you have
Okay.
an early blue dye, like, CDR, yeah, it's,
Well, yeah, those don't.
they're not.
That's not gonna last. So CDs, DVDs, vinyl, the only hosting you're gonna get out of your records is you can host a party. But a good one at that. I wanna talk a little bit about some open source tools that we can use for this. And again, all that about pirating was a giant disclaimer. I'm not suggesting anyone go out and pirate. I'm not suggesting you do anything illegal. Just
And actually now vinyl is outselling CDs.
And I think has for a bunch of years, I would say
Yeah.
for about 5 years it has.
But they never play them, it's just as a thing that you own.
I don't know, I buy a lot of records and I play them. I never stopped playing them though, and I think there are a lot of us that, I think there are a lot of folks out there that collect vinyl, myself included, that it never went away. But I mean, I will get back to that actually. Also, if you don't know, Record Store Day is next week. Folks are paying attention to that.
It's the record exchange.
Go to the Goodwill store.
Yeah, good rules.
You know what that, and I'll just tell you, that's dying out. Because people are really collecting records, your chances of getting good stuff at Goodwill have decreased significantly, I would say, in the last
Yeah,
5
because
years.
there's usually somebody that works there that gets it first.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
So this is a great piece of software, and I'm just gonna start this out with, because it's sort of the beginning of the chain. We were talking about Make MKV before you folks walked in. This is the automatic ripping machine. It was put together about 10 years ago, and it used to be a series of scripts that would take you about 2 or 3 hours, a good Sunday afternoon to install. The guy that wrote this and put it together has now put it together in a very nice Docker package, installs in 30 seconds. And it sort of brings together all of the ripping software that you need to do most of anything, and then puts it also on a web server so you can run it headless. The automatic ripping machine does some great things. It takes a look at your disk type, identifies whether it's Blu-ray or DVD, sends it to Make MKV or Handbrake, whichever you like. It ejects it rips it into storage, then transcodes it and makes it smaller and sets it up to any sort of transcoding size that you want. If it's an audio CD, it rips it using a command line tool, ABCDE, which is a fantastic command line tool for ripping lossless audio. And it takes a little bit to get used to using it, and a lot like MKV in terms of on the command line level of it. But this guy sort of put it together. The automatic ripping machine folks have put it together in a way that it just, like I said, it just works. If it's Blu-ray, DVD, or CD, that's data. It'll make an ISO backup of it, and then store it. This is available out there on GitHub, and I highly recommend you folks check it out if you're looking to, if you have a lot of media, especially if you have a lot of stuff that you want to save or get into storage. It's really handy. I did all of my DVDs using this about 2 years ago. It took a while, but yeah, everything came up great with it. And it takes all the extras on the DVDs, puts it in a folder called extras, goes out on the internet, gets all that tagging information for it. It's really a wonderful. The guy that put these scripts together, he did a really fantastic job with it. As I said, it's on in GitHub, and it gets updated frequently, probably once a month, there's a major update to it. So I'm gonna start out talking about music. This is my lottery stereo, not my stereo. I talked, a couple years ago, I did a seminar on DAV file, the DAV file media server. And again, this is a headless device, that you just put on an old computer and it runs on its own. It is a standalone headless media ripper and CD media ripper and server. This is a great piece of software. I'm not gonna get crazy into depth on this. If you wanna know more about any of these, speak to me after this today, and I can talk at great length about each one of these. DAV file is a wonderful open source product. It hasn't been updated in a while. It's still out there on the internet. You can grab it. They're stuck at Logitech Media Server 8.5. It is a very locked down Slackware Linux distribution, so you can't tinker with it. That's sort of my only complaint about that file. But it loads into memory. You can run it off a USB stick, and it will set up a full in-home music server that will automatically rip all your CDs, which is great. Currently the big kid on the block in my mind is something called the SnakeOil operating system, SnakeOil server. This is a couple guys in Western Australia that have been doing this for a while. It is an audiophile design Linux distribution that installs on Ubuntu server. It runs multiple media servers. Logitech Media Server in the last 6 months has changed. Now it's no longer supported by Logitech, if you're unfamiliar with that. Does anybody use LMS out here? Anyone using Logitech?
What?
Any of you using, one gentleman in the back, using Logitech Media Server? One person. Logitech Media, are you familiar that Logitech Media Server stopped support?
Yes.
Have you gone over to Lyrion?
Yeah.
It's great. They're doing a great job with it. The guys that are, the whole community took it over and has been updating it for about the last 6 months, and it's running very well.
We're squeeze boxes and a squeeze touch, so I don't really have a choice. I have to use it.
But it's staying alive. It's amazing. I'm happy with it. I have 2 squeeze boxes at home as well, and I'm pleased with it because they're updating the firmware for the squeeze boxes as well through Lyrion, not through SnakeOil. What SnakeOil does, what the guy's done on SnakeOil, he set up 2 sort of the killer apps on SnakeOil, or the audio kernel system tweaks. It's set up so that you can automatically have your audio read off a RAM drive, like it sets up a RAM drive in memory, so it sort of cuts your latency on your music, in-house music, in-network music streaming a lot. Whether it makes an audible difference or not, we can sit and have an argument till tomorrow about. If you're an audiophile, you probably will say that it does. I don't know that it does, but it makes me feel good that it's working. I'm also running, he also has it set up to run the Ubuntu real-time kernel on it, which again, cuts down on latency for in-network streaming. And it theoretically makes for a better sounding source, and it's wonderful. The SnakeOil servers, as I said, it's running the latest versions of Lyrion, but you can put Rune and JRiver on an MPD if you're a crazy audiophile. Is pretty good. I don't know if anyone's using MPD. Anybody using MPD? Good. It's difficult to talk about. But JRiver Media Server and Rune both are pay services to host your own media, but they're both fairly nice, and the SnakeOil server offers a link into loading those on it as well, which works really well. But Lyrion works fantastic and is a great standalone media server. The website for that is www.snakeoil.os.net. If you're interested in this, please check it out, because it's a small community that's making this go, and it's a great set of programs. What are we doing on mobile? Most folks, I think, are using Spotify. Just show of hands, who is using Spotify here? I know we had.
Regrettably, I'm trying to move off it, but it's a lot.
Well, so, okay. it gets shaky, in terms of security. You can lock it down, and I'm pretty comfortable with the security on this stuff, that I'm gonna talk about. But I'm sure there are some folks in here that are gonna tell me that I'm wrong, about opening up a port on my router to allow this stuff out. But it sets up really well. There's a piece of software called Navidrome, which is part of the Open Subsonic API. The Open Subsonic, the original piece of software that I'm referring to is Subsonic. Subsonic's maybe 20 years old at this point. Subsonic will set up a audio server in your house on your local network and then point itself outwardly, so that you can access your music from the outside, from your cell phone. There's a number of, or quite a few, client devices or client pieces of software available for telephones to access Subsonic. A few years ago, Subsonic the guy who was supporting it, stopped, and the Subsonic team moved over to something called Navidrome, which is heavily developed now at this point, and it's working really well. And what Navidrome does is exactly that. This is a picture of my Navidrome screen. This is what I use for streaming outside. All of my music internally is available on my cell phone from anywhere, as long as I have a cell connection. And Navidrome's relatively easy to set up. It runs on a Docker app. You have to configure some things on your system to run it right, but it's fairly easy to set up. There's a pay version of all of these called MadSonic, and there's probably another 5 or 6 smaller ones that are being developed, because the whole Subsonic API switched over to this Open Subsonic API that a lot of people are developing servers off of this. But I would argue that Navidrome right now is the best one on this. And like as I said, last year we did a whole seminar on setting up Navidrome. If anyone wants to talk about it, I'm feel free to grab me. I can talk about this one all day. Navidrome, Subsonic, MadSonic. There's a great Android app out there to sort of make this one giant package called Symphonium. This is a couple guys that developed this maybe about 5 years ago, and honestly, when it was initially developed, it wasn't that great. In the last 5 years, it's exploded and becoming really good. And this sort of links, you can set up all of these different audio servers or music streaming systems onto Symphonium and bring everything together. So your internal storage on your phone, anything in the Open Subsonic API, your Plex music server, NB Jellyfin, you can point it at your Google Drive. And this is a great, and I don't mean to be a commercial for this, but it's a great piece of software. It's worth the dollar donation to the guy to grab it off of the Play Store, because it's a really good system for streaming onto your phones. And here's the one that I'm going to talk about that most of you are going to know everything in here on the video stuff, but there's still some neat things happening with video. Kodi is still around. I put the XBMC logo in the corner because I just want to lament for my Xboxes. Anyone here use the XBMC on an Xbox? I just got rid of 5. I sold to the guys at the local used video groups. I was so sad.
Yeah.
I was like, no, you don't understand. There's mod chips in them and everything, and they're all set up. And they were like, no, they're only worth $10 a piece. It's very sad. But when this thing came out, when it started in the mid-90s, it was a big hack. Like, it was just a wonderful, wonderful hack. And for me, and I'm assuming, sir, for you, for the folks that raise their hand, this was my first real setup in the house. I mean, I had stuff doing it on full Windows machines, but in terms of small media centers across the house, my Xboxes were the first things that I got them just for this. XBMC long ago moved over and changed its name to Kodi. I think probably most people are familiar with Kodi. You can install Kodi on pretty much anything at this point. Personally, I run mine on Amazon products. You can sideload them into Amazon stuff, and it works really, really very well. Does video and music. I'm not so keen on how it sets up the music database. If you're a music person, it's not the greatest. But it works. If you're not that crazy in your music, the thing, sort of the killer app here for Kodi for me is that it plays ISOs. Apparently ISOs are going away, but I use them still. All of my music DVDs are ISOs, because I want all the extra stuff with them. So Kodi is still supporting ISOs, which I think is great. It's highly configurable. There are plugins all day for Kodi. You can come up with a plug. You can come up with it as a plugin for it. I sort of referring to it as the Swiss Army knife of media streamers, because it pretty much does anything you can throw at it in terms of reading media files. I've yet to find anything that the current version of Kodi doesn't like. I'm sure somebody out there can tell me there's something it doesn't like. I've been testing MB. MB's out there, works pretty well. You don't have to side load it on on any of your Fire Stick or your Roku, so it's nice in terms of that it's in the Play Store or in the App Store rather. It handles video and music as well, but again, the music database for MB is terrible. It is fairly configurable and it's nice. I would say it's highly configurable in terms of the video stuff. And sort of the nice thing about MB is it points itself outwardly so you can get it on the go. I like the idea that I can stream every piece of video that I own to my phone. Now, will I ever do it? No, but someday I will be stuck on a bus for 30 hours and I will want to have that. Someday. I'm waiting for the day, but someday it'll happen. Plex Media Server's been around for a while. This is sort of the big one. But I'll actually go back quickly on MB. It is free for basic use, but there is a monthly charge, a $5 monthly charge for it, which I believe is the same on Plex. Plex used to be a little bit more, but I've noticed the price has come down on Plex. And Plex, for argument's sake, is almost identical to MB. It's been around for a little bit longer, but I think, to be honest with you, I don't know this for a fact, but I think MB is a direct copy of Plex, and somebody copied the whole thing. And lastly on that, there's Jellyfin. What's nice about Jellyfin is it's totally open source and free. There is no charge on Jellyfin. It works almost as well as the other ones. I don't think I have played with it and had pretty good experience with it. I don't think it's as configurable as the other two, but it does set up very nicely to stream outwardly, and it's a nice piece. And it is free and completely open, still completely open source. That's sort of the selling point of Jellyfin, but it's great. And then lastly, and this is just specifically about Synologies, but I think every NAS available out there has some version of DS Video and DS Audio, or their own version. And DS Audio and DS Video stream spectacular in terms of your own stuff off of Synology. They're great. They set up in 2 seconds and point everything that's in your NAS outwardly. They don't have any of the features that any of these other stuff that we're talking about, Plex and MB. But a lot of us, if we have NASs, it's something we already have and is already available. DS Audio is horrible in terms of navigating. And the video is not so good either, but like I said, they live on, if you already have an NAS, you may already have these too. I can't not mention them. I'll just point out, and I want to hear from other folks in here what you guys are doing. This is my chain, how I'm doing stuff. Outwardly facing my NAS storage connected to Navidrum and MB, and pointing out to the internet. Internally facing on my internal network, I'm using an automatic ripping machine and pointing that at my NAS storage devices. And then each of my NAS storage devices, my videos are connected to mostly to Fire Sticks, and then to my TV, music. Again, my music servers are pointed towards the music NAS storage, and then pointing out to Raspberry Pi clients. And I use some other stuff besides my Raspberry Pis to get sort of higher res audio on my big stereo. But for the most part, I'm using Raspberry Pi stuff. And I still have some squeeze players, squeeze player in my bathroom, for example. This is my chain of media, I'm just curious, and again, I wanted to have this as a conversation, because this is something we all do on our own. How are you guys engaging?
One more, can you just back up the slide a minute? I'm still talking, sorry. Are these slides available somewhere?
Yeah, sure, I can send them to you. You're not with the DMCA, are you?
Are we gonna play Spot the Fed?
Please, and like I said,
He's right there.
I'm gonna go back to since
have a black
we're
card.
bringing this up, I'm gonna go back to my disclaimer. Please don't do anything illegal. This is only for your home movies and your self-recorded, garage band in your garage. I kind of wanted this to be a conversation really, because I'm curious what other folks are doing. I mean, at this point, that's all we really have is, we're all computer hobbyists. How have we put together our systems at home to engage with media? First off, how many of you folks are streaming or subscribe to streaming services? Everyone in here? How many more than one streaming service? Good 50%, all right. How many of you are trying to host your own stuff at home? Okay, you want to volunteer and tell us can you tell me how you're doing it?
Currently I'm just Plex.
I'm just using Plex.
Yeah, I've got a NAS at home. I'm trying to currently upgrade it because I'm running out of space. But yeah, just utilizing Plex because I've got a Roku on one of the TVs upstairs, and Plex is available on Roku. So that's made it easier for me. I'm in an older house, we're running hardwires, it's difficult to do, so being able to do it over wireless has made that
Sure.
easier. But I'm not doing any outward streaming for the most part. If I'm gonna bring something from my internal NAS and digital storage at home, I'm gonna, physically plug it up to the device and move it over, and then I've got it there. But yeah, that's about it at the moment.
How long ago did you get rid of your Xboxes?
10 years ago, they were great when I was in the military, because I would be able to bring my entire media with me, and then I'd be on deployment, set it up, and we'd be able to watch movies and whatnot in a place where we only have power and there was nothing else available, so.
Now, quick question on that, were you storing all of your stuff on the Xbox?
Yeah, I upgraded its internal storage. I got one of those Mountain Dew green ones, and that was my Xbox One. Yeah.
Nice, that for folks that don't know, that was a fantastic experience doing that. It was my sort of first entry into really hacking into hardware. And I mean, it wasn't that difficult of a hack, but it was a lot of fun to crack it open, get them on chip, and put it in and install XBMC on. I ran mine on the network, and I've always run it with a server sitting somewhere pointed at the server, and that sort of was the great, for me, that was the great piece. I would just rip stuff and download stuff onto the server and put my XBMC on. I started having trouble with the DVD drive on mine later on as they got a little bit older. In fact, on one of mine, I had to do a hack to put in a
Standard Microsoft.
standard DVD player, which is great. Is anyone else doing anything fun?
Yeah, so I have a big old NAS, and I use I long ago, when the Xboxes sort of dropped off, when Fireport got running on the original Apple TVs, I switched all over to Apple. So I use a NAS, original Apple TV, and now I use a product called Infuse, which was the original Fireport guys. And it is the Swiss Army knife in the Apple world. The only downside is it's Apple only. And then when I'm outside of the house, I just use Scale.
When you say it's Apple only, meaning what? It'll only link up to a Mac.
It only runs on Apple's environment, so it's only iOS. And the great thing about it plays ISOs. So.
Oh, wow.
And its interfaces, they have a classic interface, and they have a more Netflix-like interface now. The only downside of it is it doesn't support info files for TV. It's the most annoying thing in the world, is that.
What do you mean it doesn't support info?
Yeah, the .info files.
Right.
So it'll support .info files for getting the name of the phone, name of the video file, the artists, the actors, and something like that. Movie support's great. For whatever reason, they haven't added info support for .NFO file support for TV shows. So you have to rely on the folder structure.
Oh.
Yeah. Or their own, they also have their own tagging service where they'll pull down the information for you, but 90% of the time it's wrong. So.
How much does they charge for that?
Yeah, so it's I bought a lifetime subscription a very long time ago. So at the time it was like $50. I think now it's like, I think it's like $60-70 for a year for the service.
Cause that tagging piece, that's my complaint
Right.
about Envy. Cause everything
They're all terrible.
in Kodi, my Kodi is organized by my folder structure.
Right.
But Envy and Plex don't like.
I've tried Plex, and I don't know if anybody else has experienced, but for TV show tagging, auto tagging is more, it's terrible. I just basically ended up, there's the TMZ, the media server, I forget the name of the product, but it's, you know, they charge $10 a year. And you can edit the tags, that's the nice thing about it, so very few of these auto taggers let you edit the tags, so I can.
So 20 years ago, I was doing this just by hand. I was just ignoring tagging structure, the thing, putting it all into a folder structure, Magnum VI folder, season 1 folder, season 2 folder, season 3 folder, and done. You know, and you would think that would be the simplest way.
Right, and
for it to look at that, but
and Infuge will support the folder structure, but if you want any of that extra data, because in the case, I love for the TV, for the movie side of it, everybody does it now, it's great, it's like your own little mini Netflix. You get the artists, you get and they'll do that for their own, if the tagging actually works, they'll build that in. But they don't read, if you have it in the info files, as I've gone and I've set it up in the info files too, all the extra information.
Right.
It won't read it for the TV shows. And I haven't encountered any product. Anybody has one, please let me know for TV shows.
As a side, I'll give you a quick story on this exact topic, is that I have 20 years worth of Tour de France and cycling, sports.
Yeah, live sports, it just doesn't do anything.
Like it doesn't know, and it's all in folder and organized and everything, and it doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, I have a lot of you know, games, and it doesn't, for football at all.
The one thing in Plex for the tagging that you're having an issue with for TV shows is it doesn't just want season 1, you want season 01.
Right, yeah, you have to name it.
So you get up into that, but it also wants the name of the show before it says season.
Yep, yeah, all of them are very specific, and they're all completely different in what they require.
That's just how it pulls off of IMDb or whatever database you're pulling the information from.
If you were to get any of this stuff from less than legal places, those places tend to tag them correctly.
Exactly.
But I don't know anything about it.
But I have.
So just ask me for a friend.
Yeah, I have the info files all built, they're all ready, I mean, just use them, it's so annoying that they just don't read them for TV shows, nobody does. It's almost like the pirates know what they're doing. The quality could be better.
But I will say to this, so in terms of this, I'm much more interested personally, in the audio side of it. And I'm into the video side of it just by, I have kids and, you know, I watch TV. You know, but in terms of the tinkering side, it's the audio junk that I spend the majority amount of time with. And I will just, and I don't, and again, I'm not working for this guy, but I will say, check out SnakeOil operating system, or, you know, and it's technically it's not its own operating system. It's sort of, he's got a great big script that turns a standalone Ubuntu server into the SnakeOil server.
It'll run under a VM.
I'm sorry?
It'll run under a VM, right?
I've never done it, but I'm pretty sure it does. You just install Ubuntu server on the VM. And in terms of just if you're running a large music library, I have probably pushing 10 terabytes of music at this point. And internally,
Music, not video.
I have an enormous amount of music. And it's all high-res lossless, and I'll say that I had at one point I worked in the early 90s when I was in college. I worked at a radio station and I got a lot of CDs. And so when digital music showed up, I spent a lot of time ripping CDs, and I didn't start doing it until the lossless codec started. And then so done everything as high res as I can over the years. But what the guy's doing in the SnakeOil operating system is he's really tweaking, and I know some Apple folks, if you talk to serious audiophiles, the majority of them will argue with you about Apple and say the Apple audio stack is better than anything that you can do on Linux or Windows.
Yeah, it's just, Apple cares. That's the best way to describe it, and
Well, these guys are tweaking the Linux kernel and running some what he calls, and it's funny in his, I don't know if you can see it, if it's big enough in here. In his little side, this is the web interface for it, or for the server management. He's got a little menu item here called SnakeOil, and in the SnakeOil menu item is all of his system tweaks to sort of, and again, it's audio SnakeOil, it's the questionable. Does a $10,000 set of interconnects beat a $2 set of interconnects? So it's questionable. I like playing around with it. And this is a real, if you're into audio stuff, this is a real audio tweakers sort of way to go. And the Lyrion media server, at this point, I think it's much better than Rune. I know there's some arguments that Rune's doing some things in terms of the real-time kernel that's running under Rune, and the RAM buffering of audio that fixes it as well. But I think these guys I think Lyrion is right up there with Rune at this point. That's it. That's what I have. We're roughly running towards the end. Is there anything else anybody wants to mention or talk about?
You wanna have some fun, walk into your friend's house and say, Alexa, play hamster dance.
it's I do Huey Lewis in the news sports.
It seems to know hamster dance wherever I go.
Nice.
And it annoys people.
I wanted to see if you could elaborate a little bit more on what you were talking about when you were saying is I said we're going out.
So I started playing around with Envy maybe about 3 or 4 months ago. Just because I was like, because I've used it, Kodi for years. I wanted to take a look at what I could get, and I installed it. It was great, and then I was using it for a couple of days, and I wonder what it does to my ISO. So I went to play an ISO, and it collapsed. It doesn't work. It actually crashes it on my system. And I jumped over to Envy, and they even say they have experimental support for DVD ISO structures. And then there's a long discussion on their website about DVD ISOs are commercially people aren't interested in DVD ISOs anymore, and they're not interested in menu systems. So we're not going to spend much time trying to get support for it. Don't hold your breath waiting for support for this. Which is a bummer.
Yeah, because the decline of buying the hard media, so why would they spend time, working on something that, as your graph showed, 11% of people are only doing to potentially rip their physical media into their own library, when majority of people.
And I mean, you could make an argument from an economic standpoint that that's where the pirates are. These are the people that are pirating are the ones that are worried about the ISOs and worrying about all the extra stuff.
Yeah.
But it is a bummer that it doesn't have that support. But as I said, I use it for music stuff, because I mean that's where I've kept my eyes. So movies I don't really care too much about, but on the music DVDs, sometimes there's a whole movie on the other side inside the extras. There's
VLC will always play ISOs, right?
Oh yeah, VLC is and funny enough, in MB, what's interesting, and I wasn't aware that this existed until I started playing around with MB. Apparently there is a Kodi plugin on MB. It's like, so you can tell MB to play through Kodi, which makes no sense to me. Like, what's the point? Why am I using MB if I want to point the ISO to Kodi to have play? Like, I don't get it.
Well, a lot of people, they use, who are using Infuse, they use Plex as the backend for everything else and just use the Infuse for playing the ISOs.
Can you,
I don't get that at all.
can you tell me what, talk about Infuse?
So Infuse is, a lot of people, so on the Apple side of things, they kind of went a little bit different. The original Apple TV was basically like an Xbox, Xbox MC, and that's what I replaced my Xbox MCs with Apple TVs. The first generation units were actually little Macs, they're effectively Mac Minis, that you can then crack, and you can put this software called Infuse by a company called Arnold. And then when the Apple TV, the original Apple TVs came out, they put a software package, they put together a software package that ran all the codecs and the streaming and the code and the encodings and the tagging. They put that on as an Apple TV app. And now they have an iOS app and things like that. So the nice thing about.
So there's no reason to run Infuse anymore?
There's no reason to run on an Apple TV, like a hard-coded old Apple TV. You can just run the app, you point it to a NAS, or it can also act as a front end for Plex or Jellyfin.
Nice.
And I just have a big NAS Infuse as the front end for it, but a lot of people, they'll use Plex as a front end, and it basically streams and it reproduces the Plex interface in the Infuse interface. Except when you want to play your ISOs, and then it just goes to the Infuse interface and plays it that way. I don't know why anybody does it that way. It makes no sense.
And the only reason really is if you have the ISOs, then, I mean,
Right,
that's the bottom line.
And so I really don't, it's just, and the reason why I like it, and I like any service that doesn't try to interpose with the media. I spend all the time doing the tagging and the arranging and the info file setups. So if you are going to do that and spend all that time, having another service come along and do auto tagging or ripping and things, I don't like that. So Infuse, out of the box, you can say, don't do any of that. Here's my NAS, pull the media, pull the information and display it.
And I mean, that's how I feel about the pay service. That's why I don't like Plex.
Right.
Or really Emby. I'm using Emby now, but I don't like them, because I don't like the idea of, and Rune, especially Rune, forget it.
Yeah.
I don't like the idea of spending $10 a month or $5 a month to see my own stuff.
Right, yeah.
There's a reason why I have my own stuff and I don't subscribe to Subsonic or Spotify or Netflix.
Yeah.
So I can have my own stuff. So why am I gonna pay a $10 service, $10 a month to look at my own stuff that I'm hosting on my server? It's interesting, and I think on the DMCA side of it, I think I hope to be able to answer this question when I started researching some of this information. I can't, because the stats are all over the place. But I sort of was thinking, or came with the idea that the pirating world has downshifted and gone back to being college guys in their dorm rooms, and not everybody else. If you went back to say 2006, 2007, like everybody and their brother had some sort of torrent piece of software on their computer and stealing TV from something.
The problem with pirating is that the quality of both the audio and the video, they're obsessed with file size and not quality. So that's why it's always better to do it yourself.
I agree. Folks, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And again, like I said, I don't think I've educated anybody on anything they know. I wanted to have this conversation. I
I'm a
appreciate it.
complete beginner to all of this. I was unemployed for a long time and then my life fell apart and I was literally homeless. I had a roof over my head, but that was it. My friends kept my CDs in their basement for years. So this is, to me, I'm just looking at getting started all of this.
Whoa.
So, I don't even know what's out there. And to me, I was thinking in terms of NAS or network attached storage or something like that. And that's what I remember.
Yep.
Just very quickly, I still have tons of video and audio now on hard drive that's on my desktop. I have to travel for work. I have a laptop now with a big enough drive in it that I can just barely hold stuff. And you were talking about streaming outward. Is that something that can be done in a hotel? When you're sitting on a hotel land, they will allow an incoming connection? Or am I somehow going to my
your computer, I don't believe you can do it on their TV, but
No, but I mean on my laptop in the hotel room.
yeah.
Okay. All right,
I will just share with you, my wife is from Portugal, and so we go to visit my in-laws every year, and I listen to my music in Portugal. And again, I realize technologically, that's not that big a deal, but I'm still living in 1985, where I think I'm just totally blown away that I'm listening to this music that's on my server in like Hiawatha, New Jersey, and I'm in Portugal. But the streaming does work really well.
okay. And then just, do you have a permanent IP address for your home LAN or something? That used to be a priority.
That's complicated.
I'm wondering how you reach your home.
Well, I'll tell you, when I started using Navidrome, I set that up. But initially, for subsonic and in video stuff, there's some interesting sort of the subsonic guy, when subsonic was still being run, the guy had a server somewhere in California, and he said if you pay him, at the time it was $5, and then he went up to $50, and then he cut it off. But if you paid him $5, he would give you a name. So me, I was subsonic.coach Arnold. And basically that would point, if I put in subsonic.coacharnold.org or .com or something, it would point over to his server, and then in the subsonic software, it phoned home
Okay.
a couple times a week,
Like
it's just to
Skype
report
or
where it was.
the big advantage of it was that two people, natting could, the central server would punch a hole through the NAT for both of you. You would both go to Skype and then it would connect to you. And that was actually like a big deal at the time. Because otherwise you would need to have a fixed IP address on the internet to reach.
Yeah.
Yeah, so nowadays what I use is something called Tailscale, which is an open source VPN that uses WireGuard, which is an open source VPN format, and it works for everything. And it's great. It's so simple and easy to use. They have clients for every server that's on iOS. It's called Tailscale. So you install on your NAS, you install the Tailscale server effectively on your NAS, and then on your client device, you install Tailscale, and then you just encrypts all the packets between you and your end user. It's really convenient.
Folks, like Carl Steve's coming to remind me that we're done 2 minutes ago.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we should thank our speaker.